Hello, and welcome again to the Executive Room podcast, where we delve deep into the minds of remarkable executives who have shaped the business world with their ideas and actions. I'm your host, Kimberly Afonso, CEO and founder of the KA Consulting Group, and today it's an honor to have Doug Motley with us. Doug is the co-founder and one of JLAM's managing principals. JLAM is a real estate investment and development firm that helps investors build wealth through private real estate investments. Their portfolio spans commercial, multifamily, and residential real estate throughout the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast regions. Doug is also the chair of the State of Delaware Council on Housing, and he's a private pilot making his lifelong dream a reality. So thank you again, Doug, for joining us today. I'd love to start with some company updates. You're a co-founder of JLAM as well as one of the managing principals, and you have a super interesting career path. Could you tell us a bit about your background, and could you describe the journey of how you got here?
Sure. Yeah. So first, thanks for having me today, Kimberly. Really excited to be here and have a great conversation with you. So thank you. So my journey has been interesting, I guess. I'll start kind of in the middle. And I was in banking after college in a corporate strategy role. And the bank I was working for was about 30,000 people at the time and got acquired by a much larger, international multinational bank. And I was fortunate to be a part of the transition team of how do you bring these two big organizations together. And on the first day of that, we were sitting in this giant conference room, and at 5 o'clock, half the room picks up their briefcases and walks out the door. And the half that was still sitting there with my company, we're kind of all looking at each other and we're like, what's going on here? And that was kind of the moment where I knew that the culture was going to change completely from the company, the only company I'd worked for in my professional career. And it was kind of a wake-up call. And that was the catalyst for me to end up meeting somebody who was in real estate. We hit it off. He took a leap. A young entrepreneur himself took a leap of faith in me. At that time, I'd done one thing in real estate, and I'd done it very poorly. It was buying my first home. It was not a good transaction, but learned so much through that move from a 30,000 person company to a 20 person real estate development company. And fortunately, shortly after joining, was quickly moved into a chief financial officer role. And again, it was a sink or swim type moment. And fortunately, I was able to cobble together enough to swim and swim successfully. But it was a very challenging time in real estate. This was going into the GFC. And so learned a lot through that experience of, how do you deal with very challenging times and dislocated markets and things that are just kind of collapsing around you. That was a little bit of the catalyst to starting my first company, which was a private equity real estate fund business a couple years after first getting into real estate. And then through a sequence of events in 2011, we started JLAM. We just had our 13-year anniversary. So it's been a fantastic ride since then. Prior to where I started the story, I'm a Delaware native, so I've moved up and down the state. It's not a big place, but I've moved up and down the state in my career and went into banking, as I mentioned, after college at University of Delaware.
Really interesting experience, Doug, and thanks for also sharing a little bit more about how you've stayed local in Delaware. We'll get into that a little bit later too.
Sure.
So throughout all of this diverse experience, what are some of the lessons you learned from founding and leading these successful companies, and what do you think works so well for you?
Sure. So I think people are paramount, and really that's the foundation of kind of everything that's worked well for me. And that was something that was ingrained in me, sports teams growing up early and also first career lessons. But really, once you start your own company and you have to live and breathe it, it really resonates. So building the right team around you, I think, is very important, both in partners as well as team members, and then even vendors and trade partners, et cetera, that you work with. Alignment of interests is another really big one, and thinking through, how do you ensure everybody on your team is incented in the right ways to succeed? And if you can kind of align those two things of getting the right people, empowering them to do great work, and then compensating them and rewarding them for doing that great work, that really everybody wins together, is, I think, a consistent element of success when I look back and kind of reflect on the things that have worked well for me.
Very well said. And I completely agree about the team first approach that you shared. So, can you share with us a little bit more about what makes JLAM stand out from the competition? We saw that your company sponsors a variety of strategies that capitalize on the ever changing market opportunities, and that you call this agile investing. Can you tell us more about that? It sounded like a really interesting strategy to implement. And how does that contribute to JLAM being a leading regional real estate investment boutique?
Sure. So it's a great segue from the last point, in that we've very carefully built our team to have a broad expertise across different types of real estate. So we've got experience doing for sale residential, traditional multifamily development, office, retail, industrial, kind of the major food groups, and then can branch out and from there into the more niche segments of real estate. And our team has experience both developing and acquiring existing properties. And that was really important for how we built things, because we wanted to be able to pivot to where the market presented the best opportunities. Right? We don't control the market. We don't control interest rates. There are so many things that we don't control as it relates to real estate. So we try and find, what are the themes that are going to be moving the market that are outside of our control over time, and then how do we lean into those and capture that kind of tailwind or that rising tide to find the best opportunities within that solution set. And by building our team in a multifaceted way, we're able to more effectively do that, right? So if we were just apartment developers, well, if the market is such that developing apartments is not a good thing to do at a certain point in time, we'd have a whole team sitting there idle and twiddling their thumbs, and they would get bored. They would look for other opportunities. They wouldn't be doing rewarding work. It would be bad for our business, right? It'd be a drag on our P&L. And really for our investors, they'd be missing out on opportunities that could be in other segments of the market that are very attractive. So we can kind of address all of those things by building our team in a way that we can be nimble and can be agile to pivot to where the best opportunities are in the market, because those are going to change, and they're going to change no matter what we do. So that's really how we've kind of built the framework of our business. And then in terms of differentiation, one of the things that really is foundational to our thinking in real estate and how we invest is really, we want to create and invest in places that people want to be. That doesn't seem like a really earth-shattering type idea, but there's a lot of people who don't actually do it. And so if we think about whether it's a retail center, whether it's a community that we're building for sale product in, or whether it's an apartment complex or an office building, we want that environment to be somewhere where the people are proud to call home, the employees are proud to show up and feel motivated by going to work every day there. It's a environment that you'd want to go grab coffee or go shopping in on the weekend. And if we do all of those things right, then we're going to lease up faster. We're going to attract more tenants. People are going to tell their friends and want to live in the same neighborhood. All of those things are going to drive better, financial results for our investments, which will make our investors happy. We'll get more capital, and then that is kind of a self-sustaining cycle where then we have the capital to then go buy the next iteration of the best places that we can create. So if we make and we invest in places that people want to be, where we're proud to put our name on it, and where our investors are proud to be a part of making happen, then we think really good things are going to come from that.
Very interesting what you said, Doug, because that's something I never thought about. But you're right, not everybody is, other firms aren't investing in where people want to be, and that's a huge differentiator. Do you think there's any specific reason why other firms aren't always investing where people want to be?
There's probably a wide range of reasons for that, depending on the company. In some cases, it may be the amount of money that they have to invest, either on the small side or on the massive giant side, doesn't align well with that. So it could be, if you need to place $100 million for every deal that you're doing, then you have to be buying big stuff in certain places, right? So it doesn't give you the flexibility to go to a smaller market or to invest in more of a smaller property that may have more character and maybe be more relevant for a longer period of time. So I think the capital side of it can drive it. I think, I believe and our team believes that this is really an art and a science. It's the intersection of those two things. So you can do as many fancy financial models as you want, but if you miss on the art side of it, on the connecting with people, on the how do you create an experience that people are going to care about, if you miss on that side of it, then the financials aren't going to follow. So I think there are some people in the space who are very analytical and miss a little bit of the art, and then there's probably some people on the other side who are less concerned or maybe lose sight of the financial performance of something and just focus on the making a building pretty or something like that. And we really try and be find the intersection of those two things.
Makes a lot of sense. And with the ongoing housing shortage, which I'm sure you have heard a lot about across the US, there's a pressing need for a lot of innovative solutions in real estate development. Considering all of your extensive experience, can you share your insights on how emerging trends and strategies in real estate development can contribute to alleviating the shortage? And what opportunities do you see for developers to make a meaningful impact while ensuring sustainable growth and community benefit?
Sure. So that's a great question and a giant problem. So we'll try and scratch the surface a little bit here maybe, but there are people way smarter than me working on it and working on solutions. But just to set the stage for the issue, the U.S. has been underproducing homes relative to the need for housing with household formation and population growth. The U.S. has been underproducing homes significantly over the past couple decades, and that's led to today, depending on the source, somewhere between 3 and 6 million houses we're short in the United States. For us here in Delaware, we're a very small state. It's maybe an hour and a half to drive north to south and an hour and a half at the widest part to drive east to west. So very small place. And a recent study that the state commissioned resulted in about 20,000. We're short about 20,000 housing units in Delaware today, and that number is going to grow to 30,000, I think, by 2030. So it's a growing problem unless we take action to address it here in Delaware, and then also broadly across the country. So how you resolve that, if you take that 20,000 number and you put on kind of the average price to construct and deliver a home today, that's a $6 billion problem for the state of Delaware today. That's going to grow to $9 billion. That's not going to get solved with public capital. It requires private capital and probably some type of some forms of public-private partnerships involved in there as well. But to attract private capital, it has to be a profitable endeavor. So how do you make affordable or workforce housing profitable? I think there are a number of things that us as a country, us as states, us as local jurisdictions can do to try and remove the frictional costs associated with that. So, there are a lot of fees and permit fees, and there's a lot of soft costs, so to speak, that go into building and delivering a home. And those are definitely increasing over time. And for creating more housing, it's a impediment to that. Another big piece is just land use and how much density is permitted on a given piece of property. And there's, I think a lot of people, in a lot of places, there's a movement to, yes, develop and create this housing, but not anywhere around me. Do it somewhere else. It doesn't make sense here. This is not the right place. Well, if everybody feels that way, we're not going to solve the problem. So at some point, there's got to be some change to the land use that really finds that balance between we need more density to create more housing units, but we also need to be cognizant of the environmental impact on all of this. And so if you're against density, then almost by definition, you're in favor of sprawl, which is bad for the environment. And I don't think necessarily everybody pulls that thread and looks at all of those elements, but it's actually better for the environment in a lot of cases to have higher density, so more units on more housing units on a specific piece of ground. And that's because you're going to be closer to transportation, hubs and centers, so you're going to have less pollution from driving, but you're also taking up less land and impacting less of the environment to create the same number of homes. So how do you translate then that to action? Well, I think a lot of that comes down to, again, land use policy and enabling higher density, more homes in certain places on certain pieces of property, and that creates a little requirement of creativity and requirement of willing to change for a lot of local land use jurisdictions and policies, which is something that doesn't turning land use and policy is like turning a cruise ship, so it takes time. And so I think there's as it becomes more and more of an issue across the country, there's more encouragement, support, and pressure to try and turn that cruise ship. But the answer is going to be different, in every place. So what we're doing to try and do our part is we are trying to ideate, propose, and create projects that have a little bit of a different type of housing product. So not just single family homes or traditional apartments, but there's a lot of different things in between there. That could be more typical townhomes, quadplexes, things like that, or it could be cottages that are on, like the old school beach cottages, that type of idea. So we're trying to really be creative and see what are options we can do to create higher density in the right locations, and then working with the local land use authorities to get them comfortable with why this is the right thing. And it's not always easy. It's not always the path of least resistance, which is what most developers take because of risk and return. But it's a very important thing. I think looking forward, there are some bigger, more disruptive things going on with how you construct houses. So, manufacturing houses inside of warehouses or using 3D printing, things like that, the application of tiny homes or smaller homes. There's a lot of new ideas that didn't really exist 10 years ago. I think it'll take another decade or so for some of those to really start to move the needle. But a lot of the groundwork is happening now, which is really exciting for the industry, I think.
Thank you for sharing that, Doug, especially because just listening to you, I'm sure a lot of the viewers didn't know a lot of those things. I, for one, didn't know about sprawl. I've been following, of course, all of the developments, but even the environmental impact point that you made, I think even if there was a lot more awareness on that, maybe it would be easier in the future. So it is exciting, like you said, to hear that things are moving in the right direction, and they will take time, but things are changing. So segueing from that a bit into your experience as the chair of the State of Delaware Council on Housing. I think this is a great segue because we're talking about the synergy between both of these realms. And I'd love to hear, what opportunities do you see for more mutual benefit between private and public sectors in Delaware's housing landscape? And how do you believe housing policy within the state could even be further enhanced or improved from what you said previously?
Yeah, sure. So serving on the State Council on Housing has been a really rewarding experience, and I'll speak now not as representing them, but just from my experience there as well as in the private sector. And it's been really eye-opening getting exposure to all of the different complexities and programs that are really required to construct new affordable housing or subsidized housing, or there's a whole bunch of different forms, but really to support new and support existing low-income housing in the state of Delaware. And when we look at a project that we do on the for-profit side, we might have two sources of capital. We have a construction loan or debt, and we have equity. When you look at some of these affordable housing programs, they might have 10 or 12 different sources of capital that they have to cobble together in order to make a project work. And so it's very, very time consuming, very definitely a labor of love for many of the people that are doing it on a day-to-day basis and doing really important work, but it's very complicated. And I think there's, as I mentioned earlier, I think there are a number of things that can be focused on to try and reduce the cost of delivering affordable housing across the country, because there, in most cases, there are not very meaningful incentives to actually do that for a for-profit developer. And as I said before, the size and magnitude of this issue is something that requires a lot more partnership between public and private entities. Now, the state of Delaware, I think, has done a good job and is continuing to innovate with new programs that are really designed to kind of get properties or projects over the tipping point to make happen, and kind of being that catalyst of funds to get a project going. And I think we've been a beneficiary, as I think most of the country has, of the stimulus funds that came out of ARPA and some of the other federal programs, but those are going away. And as those funds get exhausted, it's going to take some creativity to really figure out, okay, we've exhausted those funds. Now, what are some new ideas that are not just looking to the federal government for support, but what are some new ideas of how we can attract outside private capital to really help address this issue?
Very well said. And I'd love to share with some of our viewers any emerging trends that you find exciting or promising for investors looking to build wealth in today's market. And how do you recommend any investor to navigate the balance between seizing new opportunities and managing risks?
Sure, that is a fantastic question, because risks get forgotten a lot in the conversation, but are for us one of the most important things. So from a very high level perspective, and our take on the market is, it's a lot more interesting and fun to be investing in real estate right now than it was 3 or 4 years ago. 3 or 4 years ago, everything was up and to the right. Interest rates were going to stay low. Money was going to be cheap forever, and there was not a lot of. It was very challenging to find interesting opportunities and find places you could unlock value as a real estate operator. And we've seen that completely get turned on its head over the last 3 years. And so we've taken some action to create new strategies and ideas to take advantage of that. So an example of that is, we've seen the financing market or the lending market change completely in the past 18 months, where interest rates have shot up, right, from 3 or 4% to now 8% or more. And lenders have also pulled way back on their interest in providing credit, particularly bank lenders. And so as you have the supply of construction financing and any kind of commercial real estate financing pulling way back, you have a time where we've got more than $1.5 trillion of commercial real estate loans maturing in the next 3 years. So you have this giant wave of demand of projects or properties that need their loans to be refinanced at a time when the supply is drying up. So there's a big dislocation there, and that's really interesting opportunity for us, and I know others are positioned in the space as well. So that's a place where we really like the risk return profile right now. There are other big themes that we're investing against, like the population growth and housing shortage item. And so we try and find markets within our footprint of the Mid-Atlantic to the Southeast that are even more of places that people want to be, right? So we look at things like population migration, job growth, business growth, income growth, even applications for colleges in that area, and really try and find creative ways to identify where is it that people just want to live. And a lot of times employment is going to follow that, and that's going to bring with it a lot of economic development. So that rising tide is something we try and say, okay, well, we like this market now because of those factors. Now let's go find the best ideas within that market, and we're stacking the deck in our favor to win. And so that's what we try and do in any market conditions, but now it's a lot more interesting because you're having things kind of break on the financing side, which is really opening up some really compelling opportunities. As you translate that to an individual listener or investor, I think the really understanding who it is or how it is that you're investing in real estate. What are your priorities as an individual? Do you love getting the phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning with a clogged toilet that you need to deal with on a rental property? Or do you just like getting a check once a quarter or once a month from an investment that you've made and let somebody else do the hard work? everybody's got a different answer to that, and everybody's got a different risk tolerance, amount of money that is appropriate for them to invest in real estate, et cetera. But really, this again goes back to, finding the right people, building the right team. I think long and hard as an individual investor is, how do you want to effectuate that? Do you want to be your own team, or do you want to invest with another team, and make sure that you do your diligence on that group or person that you're investing with, to make sure you understand their track record, their expertise, how they think about things, and does that align with how you do? And then the risk reward of the actual investment, and make sure that there's alignment of interest there. So there's a lot of similarities between how I think people should think about investing in real estate, as well as how you think about building a business, in terms of the right people and the right alignment of interest.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that's great advice to anyone listening on how to either continue or get started with their potential investments. So thank you for that. And I'd love to segue a little bit into leadership advice. You've had many successful ventures so far. Can you share some of the key leadership principles or values that have guided you throughout your entire journey?
Sure. So, had the fortune of starting and successfully running several different companies, and I think the one thing that is fundamental to all of that is just do the right thing. And if you have that as your North Star, it's really easy to sleep at night. So that's kind of the foundation of it all. And I think a lot of it does go back to, as you're thinking about your leadership approach, and it's selecting the right people, putting them in the right seats, and empowering them to do the right work. And so that goes to, roles and responsibilities, clear line of sight to what somebody's, responsibilities are, giving them direct and consistent feedback. So the communication piece is very important, and just empowering people, cutting them loose to do what their brains are there to do, what they've demonstrated that they're able or capable of doing, and then give them the support that they need to succeed. So as a leader, I think your role is largely removing roadblocks and providing kind of guidance and teaching. So it's arm the people to do the best work, kind of get out of the way and help remove hurdles that come up as you go through that process. And if you do that right, and you align, going back to aligning the incentives, and you do that, you align the incentives right, then I think you're setting yourself up for success.
It always comes down to, do the people around you have the right tools? So
Yep.
very well said. And this is a podcast all about vocal leadership. I was personally impressed that you're so active online, very well versed with your personal brand. I really liked, the different series that have been on your profile. What advice would you give to other CEOs or executives in your industry looking to get started with their public presence?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's hasn't always been comfortable because it's a little out of my comfort zone. I probably lean a little more on the introvert side. So when I started kind of putting myself out there on social media, which I do think is important, and I'll get into why in a second, it definitely felt weird. And that changes a little bit over time, but you still have a little bit of that feeling. But I think the important underlying thing there is you try and find things that may help somebody and may be useful for somebody to hear. And it may just be one person that you impact, but if you are sharing a message that gets heard by somebody, which again in my business could be they think of a question to ask somebody they were thinking about investing in real estate, and they find out something that either made them think that was a better idea or a bad idea, and they decided to change their investment decision. Just one person having that experience, it's worth it. And so I think keeping in mind that the sharing is an important point of, you're doing it not for yourself but for whoever the recipient may be, that there's some message that's useful to hear. I think an easy start for people who are maybe less comfortable of going all the way out there with videos would be sharing and commenting on things that they think have merit that they see on social media, giving their thoughts and giving a little bit of perspective as to how they may be different or think along the same lines as somebody who takes a position. supporting people voices that they like and that they respect and that they find interesting, supporting them, providing comments, to things that they take. And you'll see, I think, even some of the algorithms, I think, support this stuff with promoting, your own content if you're active in that way. But really just, I think some aspect of consistency as well, of trying to do it regularly, and try and think of things that, what questions are you hearing from either your staff or external people is a really good source to come up with ideas, of what content people may want to hear or see.
Those are great tips. And
What are some of your tips for that?
I completely agree with everything you said, so it was great to hear it from you. Definitely commenting on other people's content is just as important as posting yourself. So I really liked you sharing that with the audience, because that's one thing that some people get wrong. The best thing to do is to have your own content, but also to interact with other people's content through comments and liking, and the algorithms always favor that. So I think those were great tips, and I completely agree with your strategy. It was great to hear that you actually are a little bit more on the introverted side, because really any leader, introverted, extroverted, can have a great presence, and it's about leaning into what you feel comfortable with. So I think the tips you gave, that you were able to, find this niche of content of helping other people, that's something that you feel comfortable with, so it makes it even easier. So you did the talking. You said it really well. So thank you for that, Doug.
Cool. I
And
think one of the other benefits that come out of it is kind of, you have this shadow audience of people that never do anything. But then I've run into a coffee shop and somebody comes up and says something to me, and I had no idea they saw any of my stuff. And so even if you may not see it in the metrics, there a lot of times are some a much wider reach than you may think. And the networking kind of that comes out of all of that activity can be really, really interesting and beneficial. And you make great connections and some great friends from it too. So take the professional side out of it. There's just a really cool personal element to it too.
completely, very well said. There's some recent stat that I think now 80% of people on LinkedIn just are called lurkers, which they just look at the content. So that's exactly what you said. So it's good to hear that, you saw that firsthand. That's something we see a lot too. So really
Yeah.
great insight. And I read about how you've been a recent guest at Temple University's real estate classes, and also you guest spoke at University of Delaware's real estate classes. Sounds really great that, at this part in your career, you're also able to engage with students and discuss industry challenges. Can you tell us more about this experience of interacting with the next generation? Have you noticed anything, interacting with Gen Z? Because we see so many things online about how they're a little bit different than previous generations. And what advice do you have to any other aspiring leaders looking to make an impact with this generation?
Sure. So interesting order of questions, because what brought both of those speaking engagements about was my stuff that I was doing on LinkedIn from people who I either didn't know or hadn't talked to, connected with in a long time. So a great, interesting segue or set of circumstances that led to these events happening. But yeah, it was really, really fun doing both experiences, and I hope to continue to do them. It's really neat for me to go back to campus at U of D and share some of my real world experiences, and thinking back to what I experienced in college. And I'm sure it's way different now, but there was not a lot of that, not a lot of, hey, here's how the real world application of some of these things may work, or things you run into in coursework. When the heck would you ever actually use this in practice? Well, you get to have those conversations with people, and sometimes the answers are, yeah, you don't ever use that in practice, or the answer may be, yeah, absolutely, here's some examples of when. But it's really exciting, engaging, inspiring for me to get to be able to talk with young people who are interested in real estate, because we're always looking for new talent in our space, and I'm sure many other industries are. And so going back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, is sharing something that somebody else can find useful. talk about an unbelievable way to do that, of people who are, just on the forefront of starting their career, and some tips and things that I can share that are, if I could do it all over again, here's how I would have perfectly designed my career, or what may, suggestions I would have, different paths I would have taken. But it's just really rewarding to be able to have those conversations, and again, hopefully help young people, connect with some of them, open doors for some of them. That's been one of the really fun parts about it, is getting, contacted, emails, LinkedIn messages afterwards, and getting to know some of the students a little bit, and having a conversation with them about something they may be interested in doing, and being able to connect them with somebody I know who can open a door, or is hiring for a role in that position, and really helping them, jumpstart the beginning part of their career. So it's been really, really fun. And if anybody out there ever has the opportunity to do something like that, it's really invigorating. So highly recommend it.
I think really well said. It does sound really invigorating and a great way to give back. So I'd love to now wrap up with a personal question. Saw that you became a private pilot, which sounded really cool. Can you share with us a little bit about the inspiration behind your passion? And, with that, what are some of your next goals as well? Do you have other personal or professional goals, or really what's next for you?
Sure. So, the flying thing has been really amazing. And the root of that is, ever since I was a little kid, was just really interested in and intrigued by flight. So would doodle planes and helicopters and all that stuff, would go to air shows when I had the chance, and just, when planes were flying over, would run outside so I could see them, all of those things. And the getting your pilot's license kind of requires time and requires money, and I had not had the intersection of those two things earlier in life. And actually was, it's ironic, I was at a friend's house and happened to see his daughter, who was 16, and I've known her since she was born. And she was, it was a weekend day, and she's flipping through some book at the end of the kitchen island. And I asked her what it was, and she said, "Oh, I'm taking flying lessons. I'm studying for an exam." And so I walked around the island and started probing her, asked her like 20 questions about the whole thing. And this is a 16-year-old, and so I go on with the rest of my day, and I'm thinking about it, kept coming back to, okay, this is a 16-year-old who's at a very rigorous high school, is taking AP classes and all of that, so very requiring coursework. She plays sports, and she's also just trying to find time to be a kid and like do fun things that you do when you're in high school, and she's made time to do this. That immediately removed every excuse I had ever had. And so that was when I picked up the phone and started making some calls, and kind of started my training for ultimately getting my license. So it's been amazing thus far. It's really fun, both personally and professionally. Where we're located, it can be challenging to drive to some of the places we do business in a timely manner, and this totally changes that. So next steps, I think, on that are continue to build my experience set. It's just like everything, where it's not you get your license and then you're kind of done learning. It's every day is new things to learn and perfect. And so I plan on continuing, my learning on that front. And that really just continues to open up, more places to explore personally, of, going to fly to new parts of the United States and explore in that regard. So they're a little related there, but it's a really fun time to be doing those things.
Well, that's a really incredible way that you got started on that. So thank you for sharing that story with us. And this was a really great conversation, Doug. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure that everyone listening got a ton of great insights about the industry. So thank you for sharing those. And until next time.
Thank you. Appreciate the time, Kimberly, and good chat.